recently a wild frontier rudely ruled by vigilance committees. Some Americans suggested to me that he was the sheriff, the regular hard-riding, free-shooting sheriff of Bret Harte and My Boyhood Dreams. Others suggested that he was an agent of the Ku Klux Klan. That great nameless symbol he exhibited was theirs. But whether he was a sheriff acting for the law, or a conspirator against the law, or a lunatic entirely outside the law, I agree with the former conjectures upon one point. I am perfectly certain he had something else in his pocket besides a badge, and I am perfectly certain that under certain circumstances he would have handled it instantly and shot me dead between the gay bookstaff and the crowded trams. And that is the last touch to the complexity. For though in that country it often seems that the law is made by a lunatic, you never know when the lunatic may not shoot you for keeping it. Only in the presence of that citizen of Oklahoma I feel I am confronted with the fullness and depth of the mystery of America. Because I understand nothing, I recognize the thing that we call a nation, and I salute the flag. But even in connection with this mysterious figure, there is a moral which affords another reason for mentioning him. Whether he was a sheriff or an outlaw, there was certainly something about him that suggested the adventurous violence of the old border life of America. And whether he was connected with the police or no, there was certainly violence enough in his environment to satisfy the most ardent policeman. The posters in the paper shop were placarded with the verdict in Hammond trial, a cause célèbre which reached its crisis in Oklahoma while I was there. Senator Hammond had been shot by a girl whom he had wronged, and his widow demanded justice, or what might fairly be called vengeance. There was very great excitement culminating in the girl's acquittal. Nor did the Hammond case appear to be entirely exceptional in that breezy borderland. The moment the town had received the news that Clara Smith was free, newsboys rushed down the street shouting double-stabbing outrage near Oklahoma, or banker's throat cut on Main Street, or otherwise resuming their regular mode of life. It seemed as much to say as, do not imagine that our local energies are exhausted in shooting a senator. Or, come now, the world is young, even if Clara Smith is acquitted, and the enthusiasm of Oklahoma is not yet cold. But my particular reason for mentioning the matter is this. Despite my friend's mystical remarks about the Upper Ten, he lived in an atmosphere of something that was at least the very reverse of a respect for persons. Indeed, there was something in the very crudity of his social complement that smacked strangely enough of that egalitarian soil. In a vaguely aristocratic country like England, people would never dream of telling a total stranger that he was a member of the Upper Ten. For one thing, they would be afraid he might be. Real snobbishness is never vulgar, for it is intended to please the refined. Nobody licks the boots of a duke, if only because the duke does not like his boots cleaned in that way. Nobody embraces the knees of a marquis, because it would embarrass that nobleman. And nobody tells him he is a member of the Upper Ten, because everybody is expected to know it. But there is a much more subtle kind of snobbishness pervading the atmosphere of any society trial in England. And the first thing that struck me was the total absence of that atmosphere in the trial at Oklahoma. Mr. Hammond was presumably a member of the Upper Ten, if there is such a thing. He was a member of the Senate or Upper House in the American Parliament. He was a millionaire and a pillar of the Republican Party, which might be called the respectable party. He is said to have been mentioned as a possible president, and the speeches of Clara Smith's counsel, who was known by the delightfully Oklahomite title of Wild Bill McLean, were wild enough in all conscience. But they left very little of my friend's illusions that members of the Upper Ten could not be accused of crimes. Nero and Borgia were quite presentable people compared with Senator Hammond when Wild Bill McLean had done with him. But the difference was deeper, and even in a sense more delicate than this. There is a certain tone about English trials which does at least begin with a certain scepticism about people prominent in public life being abominable in private life. People do vaguely doubt the criminality of a man in that position, that is, the position of the Marquis de Brinvilles or the Marquis de Sade. Prima facie, it would be an advantage to the Marquis de Sade that he was a marquis. But it was certainly against Hamon that he was a millionaire. Wild Bill did not minimise him as a bankrupt or an adventurer. He insisted on the solidity and size of his fortune. He made mountains out of the Hamon millions, as if they made the matter much worse, as indeed I think they do. But that is because I happen to share a certain political philosophy with Wild Bill and other wild buffaloes of the prairies. In other words, there is really present here a democratic instinct against the domination of wealth. It does not prevent wealth from dominating, but it does prevent the domination from being regarded with any affection or loyalty. Despite the man in the starry coat, the Americans have not really any illusions about the upper ten. Maclean was appealing to an implicit public opinion when he pelted the senator with his gold. But something more is involved. I became conscious, as I had been conscious in reading the crime novels in America, that the millionaire was taken as a type and not as an individual. This is the great difference, that America recognises rich crooks as a class. Any Englishman might recognise them as individuals. Any English romance may turn on a crime in high life, in which the baronet is found to have poisoned his wife, or the elusive burglar turns out to be the bishop. But the English are not always saying, either in romance or reality, "What's to be done if our food is being poisoned by all these baronets?" They do not murmur in indignation, "If bishops will go on burgling like this, something must be done." The whole point of the English romance is the exceptional character of a crime in high life. That is not the tone of American novels or American newspapers or American trials like the trial in Oklahoma. Americans may be excited when a millionaire crook is caught, as when any other crook is caught. But it is at his being caught, not at his being discovered. To put the matter shortly, England recognises a criminal class at the bottom of the social scale. America also recognises a criminal class at the top of the social scale. In both, for various reasons, it may be difficult for the criminals to be convicted. But in America, the upper class of criminals is recognised. In both America and England, of course, it exists. This is an assumption at the back of the American mind which makes a great difference in many ways, and, in my opinion, a difference for the better. I wrote merely fancifully just now about bishops being burglars, but there is a story in New York illustrating this, which really does, in a sense, attribute a burglary to a bishop. The story was that an Anglican Lord Spiritual of the pompous and now rather antiquated school was pushing open the door of a poor American tenement with all the placid patronage of the squire and rector visiting the cottagers, when a gigantic Irish policeman came round the corner and hit him a crack over the head with a truncheon, on the assumption that he was a housebreaker. I hope that those who laugh at the story see that the laugh is not altogether against the policeman, and that it is not only the policeman but rather the bishop who had failed to recognise some fine logical distinctions. The bishop, being a learned man, might well be called upon, when he had sufficiently recovered from the knock on the head, to define what is the exact difference between a housebreaker and a home visitor, and why the home visitor should not be regarded as a housebreaker when he will not behave as a guest. An impartial intelligence will be much less shocked at the policeman's disrespect for the home visitor than by the home visitor's disrespect for the home. But that story smacks of the Western soil precisely because of the element of brutality there is in it. In England, snobbishness and social oppression are much subtler and softer. The manifestations of them, at least, are more mellow and humane. In comparison, there is indeed something which people call ruthlessness about the air of America, especially the American cities. The bishop may push open the door without an apology, but he would not break open the door with a truncheon. But the Irish policeman's truncheon hit both ways. It may be brutal to the tenement dweller as well as to the bishop. But the difference and distinction is that it might really be brutal to the bishop. It is because there is, after all, at the back of all that barbarism, a sort of negative belief in the brotherhood of men, a dark democratic sense that men are really men and nothing more, that the coarse and even corrupt bureaucracy is not resented exactly as oligarchic bureaucracies I resent it.